talk about sit position. So, those of you who've done some tunnel stuff with me, these will be very familiar, stupid little diagrams as always. So, side profile of a sit position, you're kind of looking, getting something along the lines of this. Right. That's roughly what we're talking about. So what, that's a bit ridiculous. For a start, I'm going to bring it down to a level where I might be able to.
Oh, is it giraffe? It's a giraffe.
Alright, a little bit better. So, in the tunnel, we very much rely on what's going on with the air on the shoulder blades and pushing on that. Now, although you've got a rig sticking itself into this area here, a lot of the rules still apply. The only difference is now that we don't tend to get that direct push of the air onto the shoulders. We've now got it under here, under the rig. That's actually quite significant. You know, that is as big an area as the underside of one of your legs for sure, if not a little bit bigger. What we're still going to be getting, obviously the air's coming up from underneath, still going to be coming off us like that, and we're still going to be getting this negative pressure coming off our chest. Still going to get this, it's going to be giving us a lot of extra lift. So the moment we relax this same position in the sky, we're probably going to end up adopting a slightly different position altogether because they've got to break up the bad habits. And this is actually fairly common. So, you guys who have come from the tunnel, you would have got into the sky, you probably would be in a very good position right off the bat. And we haven't had to undo all of these bad habits. And believe you me, that's saved you a lot of time. A lot of time. So, this is kind of what we're after with this position. Your feet are very slightly outside your knees. And we don't have, I know there's a lot of strain when we put this position in. We don't have to strain this, we just have to have them so that your feet have that positive air on the inside of your calves. The next bit is what you do with your upper body. Pushing your chest out, pushing through the rig onto the wind. Pushing your hands down like this. This, you can see this from the sides. This is a relatively balanced position. If I wanted to do a turn in this position, probably it's going to be a prudent idea to leave the legs exactly as they are. I'm trying to say to myself, don't change the legs. Leave the legs exactly as they are. Because you're pushing onto the wind through the rig, actually, if you twist your back slightly, that's going to give you a turn. And you're not even going to notice what's actually happened. You just twist your back a little bit. Oh yeah, there we go. Turning nicely. The air's going to corkscrew off your back and give you a good turn. The other thing we can do is you can use your arms. Push one arm down and one arm up. That's going to give you a nice turn. It's going to act like rudders, turn you around, turn the other way. So that works as well. The reason why I would suggest saying that the feet as a turning surface are the last resort is because that's where the air hits first, and that's where this is going to feel very, very overpowering. Like the legs are everyone's sort of nemesis with this stuff. It's like, well, why aren't my legs doing what I'm telling them to do? And it's because they're at that end of the body, and the wind is trying to push them off one way or another. So if you push one leg into the wind a little bit more than the other one, yes, it's going to give you a turn. If you could do it just 1.5 inches and you were really strong with the leg, that will give you quite a nice turn. Chances are, as we push that in a little bit, the air's going to want to just grab it and really give us a big movement. It's going to be quite uncomfortable. From here, taking a dock, a side dock is much easier. Okay, taking a forwards dock is feasible, still difficult. If we're like this, it's almost impossible. So if you're trying to take a forward head-on dock, then you have to twist your upper body, take the grip, and then this would naturally, as we just talked about, give us a turn. So you've then got to go slightly asymmetric or in a daffy position with the legs in order to counter that turn. And none of that happens without doing a lot of that and feeling it, and it takes a long time. It takes a long time. So the head-on dock is very, very tricky. And it can happen, but it takes a long time. Now this is the other thing that happens with a head-on dock, is as I'm taking it, if I don't counter it and push behind me as much as my arm is going forwards, then as I'm bringing this forwards, I'm taking air off the back, so I've got to increase it. If I don't increase it, and I just reach forward and I grab it, then I'm going to be sliding backwards. Yeah, it's going to hit my chest and sliding back, and then you'll kind of never get there. Or if you did make contact, you'd be pulling the person forwards, probably off their sit as well. So it wants to be kind of like a nice, super balanced thing with this. If we talk about the sort of the fundamentals with the legs, so just backtrack a little bit, because I got sidetracked with dogs. While you're sat on the chair, I want everyone just to, first of all, put their feet like Charlie Chaplin did. So have your knees relatively upright if you can. So just bring your bottom part of your leg upright. And now go Charlie Chaplin with the feet. Alright, with your feet on the ground, I want you to try and bring your knees together. Alright, so you're going to feel a physical lock there. It just doesn't want to happen, does it? Now take your feet and make them parallel to each other. And now feel the difference. Alright, so this is quite an important element to us starting to get the air on the inside of the calves. And like I was saying a minute ago, we don't need to go really big with this. It might be that one day you want to dig in and get some height. But just for the standard position, it just wants to be positive that your feet are slightly outside your knees. And it relies on us having our feet, give or take, parallel, rather than Charlie Chaplin. As soon as I'm Charlie Chaplin, that air is no longer on the inside of my calves. The other sort of element with this as well is that our feet are slightly behind our knees in order to be in that balanced position. You can kind of see that from the side here. That looks imbalanced, doesn't it? Here, my feet are flat to the air, and I'm actually having to force my toes up a bit. And if I don't force my toes up, and I keep it at 90 degrees, as I bring my feet back, now you can see I've got an ankle. Now ankle is going to make a difference. And I gently try and push it's going to make my feet feel like they're wanting to go forwards and push in front. And it's just because of the air hitting the other side of my soles. I can turn all that power off just by bringing my toes up. Now that's going to make a huge difference to us. The other thing you can do with your student, and it's going to be tricky unless we've got a few more props. The skeleton doesn't really want to work unless this is at sort of 100 degrees. So let's say, and you can have a little go at this at home later on or whenever if you've got a few more props. Basically, if I've got roughly 100 degrees here, as I do this with my back, I sort of feel the movement of my back. I can feel a little bit of tension on the small of my back. And that's with this being 100 degrees. The more this is open, the less tension I feel there. If I've got less than 100, let's say I'm down to 80, alright, and I'm kind of like this. You can put your feet up on a chair like this, put them up on something that gives you a smaller angle. So even with a smaller angle down to about 80 degrees, immediately as I try to push back, there's a lot more resistance on the small of my back here. And it's really noticeable. And if I go even more again, it's almost impossible for me to get a good shape of my back. So sometimes people sit flying, fall off onto their back just because they're actually too crunched here, which then means that the back can't work properly, which then means they fall back. So the response when they land, and you're watching on the video, you say, okay, so what's happening is we don't have enough air on the back. We don't have enough air on the back because you're too crunched at the hips. Because you're too crunched here, it's not letting the back work. Now, for a lot of people, I find that we actually need to physically do the exercise of putting people's feet up on something that's sort of 6 or 8 inches high to close that gap up, to get them to actually feel the difference of what that does to their back. If you don't do the actual exercise, you've got nothing to refer back to. So we can talk about the theory of it, but you need to do it practically so people actually understand what's going on. So if I want to go up in a sit position, I need to get more lift from somewhere. So let's say, for argument's sake, that my feet out as much as they are now, and I'm feeling a little bit of the air on the inside of my calves, and I've got a certain amount with my back, and I'm pushing down on the wind. Let's say this is giving me 140 miles an hour of wind speed, and I'm falling 140. If I want to slow this down, I've got to increase what I do with the legs. I've got to increase what I get from the back. So the two things are going to work together. So if this is normal, if I want to come up both together, as my feet out and my chest back, my chest out, and I'm leaning back on the wind. I'm getting more from these two surfaces that are doing all the work. If you don't do them at the same time, then something's going to be slightly more overpowering than the other. So if I only did my chest, then I would go up, but I'd also go forwards a bit. If I only did my feet, then I would go up, but I'd also almost feel like I was going to fall onto my back because I haven't got the balance correct. So just before someone does a manoeuvre like slows down, it's a good idea to say to yourself, let's actively say, I'm going to move my arm, my legs and my upper body together. And if they're not done at the same time, it's probably not going to work. So that's roughly speaking the sort of the core body position for the sit. I always think it's helpful if someone can feel the air on the back of the head, then it means that the air is flowing over their back and they've got a good shape. If they can't feel the air on the back of the head, the chances are they're leaning forwards. If you can't see your hands, then chances are you're leaning forwards. So you can have a bit of a system check with your student. You say, okay, whilst you're sit flying, say to yourself, can I see my hands in my peripheral vision? I mean, even if it requires a bit of a head turn, that's okay, because if they're back here, it's still not hardly going to be able to see them. So, system check, is that there? Are you feeling the air on the back of your head? If you are, you've definitely got a nice shape with the body. And in fact, if someone can see their feet out in front, then they're probably, on the way to falling onto their back anyway. Now all you can really do with this stuff is go through the theory of it and then get them in the sky and see what happens. A lot of what they're going to be doing is they're going to be taking stuff from out here that feels nice and feels comfortable, and then they're going to be trying to translate that into the sky. And anyone who's done any time realises that actually almost everything is opposite. Nothing is the same as out here. So when somebody is sat at a chair, we all sort of sit with our feet closer together. If you were to sit fly like this, you'd be trying to balance on a knife edge and it's not going to work. So we actually then need to make that conscious decision to get your feet out wider. Then that leads on to the other problem. Well, I don't do this in normal life. I'm definitely not used to the fact that the air is trying to take the inside of my calves and pull my legs apart, and it makes me feel unstable and unsteady. So that doesn't feel very nice. So I would rather do this, and I'd rather do Charlie Chaplin feet, because that's also another sort of thing that it's just more comfortable doing that. So what feels comfortable and nice isn't going to fly particularly well, as a general rule. The other small extra element is if I'm falling backwards out here, then I'm going to naturally try and push off the ground behind me, and I'm probably going to try and get the heavy end of my body over the middle of myself, so that I'm not going to fall over anymore. That's how I respond to it. Now what we've got is you've got the air behind you is the bit that's holding you up. So if you're in a sit and you start to fall backwards, the response in fact needs to be completely the opposite to a natural reaction, and it needs to be to push onto the wind behind us, and that is going to then lift us up. And so this is, again, it's quite easy to have that in theory, but we need to have it as an instinct, because generally speaking, if we're sit flying and we start to fall backwards, we have to say to ourselves, no, I'm falling backwards. What do I need to do? He's talking about this before. I've got to push down. It's just, you know, the moment's gone, you're on your back. So it actually has to become a natural reaction. Now, as a coach, there's a lot of things you could do to drill that, and believe me, in the tunnel, it's a piece of cake to try and get out of that habit. I say a piece of cake relatively to get out of the habit, because we can be in the tunnel, we can do a whole load of exercises that work on nothing but doing the back, and people feel the power around them, and that switch flicks, and they go, okay, I'm in this power now, throw away what I do outside, and now I'm going to use the power that's behind me and around me. Or you can do, if you're in this kind of scenario of drop zone, to try and get somebody to trust that fact, is sit them on something like a table like this, and you be stood behind them, and say, okay, start to fall backwards, and then put your hands on their shoulders, and say, right, I want you to push yourself back up by pushing onto my shoulders to bring yourself upright, and get used to that notion that there is something there that you can push against, and just try and drill that a little bit. But the reality with this is, we jump out, it's a new position, it's, even if it's 5 or 6 jumps down the line, the notion of actually having someone remember, okay, I'm falling backwards, more of this, to bring myself up, is quite tricky to get people's head around. But without it, you know, we're just going to fall off our back all the time. Now, the reason this position, skydivers adopt this, is that actually we can recognise this and understand this. This is the weight over the middle of our body. This is us pushing behind us, and this is why it sort of works. But it's unversatile for all of those other reasons. So then people need to start to, you know, to throw that away to get into a good versatile position to work. So if you were coaching this, done the exit, we would like to avoid this notion of jumping up and flying up and down the flight line, and backsliding. Now people get a backslide on when they're in this position. They don't get a backslide on when they're in this position. So if we get this one from the start, great, you're probably not going to have an issue with it. The other thing you can do is you can, without trying to add too many things into the mix for the support chap who's, you know, learning all this stuff for the first time, is if you can have a heading, and that heading can be you as the other flyer, then suddenly their life can be made a lot easier, and even if they did backtrack, you can actually be in control of where they're backtracking. So that then puts another little spanner into the works, and it also sort of magically relies on them being able to sit fly and try and sort of keep some kind of a heading straight away, which is very, very unlikely. Now I would suggest that if somebody can hold a sit, then they might have some movement with it. There's probably not going to be significant. If they can hold a sit, then actually they can probably control the heading to a certain extent. If they're in this position, just by focusing on it and using the upper body to turn, they won't even, because this is so powerful, they won't even be knowing how they're staying on the heading, they just will. If they've got a natural turn to their body position anyway, and they're doing full 360s, I'd say you're in quite a safe place. If someone's just doing turns, they're not going to be tracking up and down the flight line because they're just continuously turning. It's more the person that is, they're on a heading that, whilst they're backsliding, is sliding straight down the flight line. Those are the things that might be of consideration for us. And then it's sort of almost down to you to try and get yourself to them, and they'll be pre-briefed saying, I am your heading. So then you need to get to them, and you need to be able to say to them, you need to kind of go, okay, keep looking at me, and then if they're flying down the flight line, then you'll have turned them by the fact that you're looking at you. Potentially, so many variables, not true. You're in the plane, you're going to go over the most important bits, which is going to be, first of all, tell them just to think about the exit. So you might talk about the whole skyline on the way up, and then the last 2 minutes before that red light goes on, just get them talking about the exit. Because actually, if you don't get the exit right, that'd be a real shame, be a real waste, just because they've forgotten to do whatever. So you can say to them, right, jump out, remember, get out onto the rail as soon as that person's there before you, but a good 7-8 seconds or whatever it is to get yourself into a nice position. Remember, head back, looking down at the horizon, down your nose. You're pushing back on the air with your shoulders. Okay, you've got a nice position here as far as this is going to be your sit-fly angle for your legs. And then ready, set, and go. Remember what you need to do, stabilizers out, hands up like you've been arrested. Just go over the most important bits initially. Once they've gone out and if they're in this position, as they start falling down the hill, in order to stay upright, they'll just start to bring their arms down into their sit anyway. They're then in their sit position, and this is where, how do we have hand signals that could ever tell somebody who's flying like this that they've got to fix those legs? This is incredibly common. I see people flying like this all the time. How would you communicate? Parallel your feet up, bring your knees together, push your feet out. Just simply not going to happen, is it? Be realistic. All you're going to do is watch the guy. Maybe you could say, bring your knees together, and just sort of, if luck is on our side, the rest of it will sort of follow, but it's fairly unlikely. You could have other signals for pushing on the wind. So if you could say to someone, if you see me banging my chest, then I want you to try and push your chest out like a gorilla. Push your chest out. Whatever it is, they have their sort of predetermined thing. So the most common thing that people are going to do is going to be not pushing back on the wind, wanting to centralise their weight over the middle of their body. You could do other things like get their attention, pointing your hand, and then do whatever the action is. Bring your hands forward. So I find this hands forwards like that will actually get someone to do this. And then of course you're trying to get across this notion of, okay, so they're like this, I'm telling them to bring their hands forwards. Well, that's not going to work because that was actually keeping them stable. That's going to make them unstable. So the only thing, what we're really trying to tell them is to bring their hands forwards and bring their back into the wind wall. That's what we're trying to tell them. Just impossible. Okay, it's not going to happen. So you can give it a go. You could talk about this stuff as much as you can before you get out of the plane, but you can't really do very much. All you can do is get down and debrief. Try and keep them nice and close so that they've got a really good video that's good to debrief. And I would suggest concentrate on getting good video much more than trying to fix them while they're flying, personally. I almost kind of go, there's no way he's going to understand me. There just isn't. So I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to keep him perfectly in frame, and we'll debrief this when we get down on the ground. With a good debrief, once he's on the ground, he can then go off and do a number of solos where he's thinking about that stuff. So something's probably happening while he's sit flying, and you can say, okay, this is happening all the time because. So very often people fall off to the side because they've got their feet together. That just kind of pushes them off to the side like this. And that's obviously exaggerated, because even if it's just feet angled like this, we need to get the air slightly on the side of the calf and the guy's gone. So you say, okay, we're falling off to the side because we needed to get your feet out further. You can say to them, while you are flying, I'm forward driving towards you all the time because you're in this position and the air's hitting your chest and your backside all the time. So we want to reverse that and get the air on our back. And then that also relies on you bringing your hands forwards a little bit. You need to be in much more of an upright position. So then it might be a sake of, right, let's try and make this a little bit simpler. What's really going to work for the guy? What's probably going to work is, if he's like this, the horizon is going to be like this in his vision. So you can say, from here, I want you to change where the horizon is. I want you to look down the nose at the horizon. So by doing this, now the horizon is in the right place. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be in a really good position and be able to do all sorts of things with our head like this. Okay, horizon's in the wrong place, but I'm still in a good position. Horizon's in the right place, still in a good position. The reality is with this, that people tend to be relatively inflexible. So you can tell them to sort of try and stretch things out, but really it takes a long time to get properly flexible with what you do with your back. So, generally speaking, somebody's body will follow their head. There's no reason for it. I haven't really moved my head. What I've done is I've moved my head by moving the rest of my body. But that's generally how people tend to operate. So you can say, these are the visuals you need to have. And if you're looking down your nose at the horizon, and you can see your hands and your peripherals, then your upper body is probably in a fairly good position. And then from there, it's how they deal with what they're doing with their legs. So at the end of the skydive, there's really nothing wrong with sort of the first couple of jumps, saying to them, giving them a wave off or whatever. And predetermine this as well. Say up, wave off. And initially it's going to take them a while to kind of get that backtracking looking good and working. So I would say, let's give them a bit longer doing a backtrack. If someone sit flies down to 6 grand, then backtracks for the last, for sort of 1,500 feet to 2,000 feet. That will give them a nice period of time to really get into the swing of it, kind of fall onto their back. They've got that sort of the sun visuals in their head. Where's the star? Okay, I need to keep it over this side of me and keep on flying like that. And give them a bit of extra time. So, unless you set their ditter at 6, they're not going to really know. So, you could wave off at 6, okay, backtrack, you'll watch the backtrack, and then ideally you'd like to see them roll over, get nice and steady, and then, deploy. And not be in a rush about it, be altitude aware, because you're going to be roughly on the same level. So if you can see that someone is, if you're, say you've got a ditter set at 4 grand or whatever it is, when you hear that ditter, you should be sort of properly seeing them roll onto their belly and getting ready to deploy themselves, so they know fully what's going on. And that's how I would probably run the first couple of jumps. After that, they should be getting into the hang of the backtracks, and you then really can kind of go, okay, cool, we get to 5.5. I want you to wave off, tell me, stay fully altitude aware, and then I want you to track away, and then carry on from there. All right. So that's kind of your first sit fly jump. Just trying to get them up into the sit. Chances are that you're probably going to have someone fall on and off their back a number of times. And this is where teaching a good transition comes into its own. Now, if I was on my back, on the floor, as we are now, and I wanted to get up into my sit, then I'm going to be doing all the things that don't work in the sky. I'm going to be trying to bring my body over the middle of the body, I'm going to be pushing back on the table behind me, right, and I'm trying to throw myself up to get myself in that right position. And you'll find that most people are going to be trying to do this when they first start this stuff. For me, the method in the tunnel that works really, really well is to actually say to people, even though you may look at this, someone doing this position in the tunnel, it might look like it's being thrown into place. It isn't, it's being flown into place. You are using the air to bring yourself up. And if I was in a tunnel with somebody, and I said to them, close your eyes and do nothing but this action, bring the feet down to your bum, and push your hands behind you and look at your hands, and count 1,000, 2,000, you would be now up in your sit, and you could just bring your arms down into position. So what you've done there is you're trying to get it across that this action is a completely different thing. This is using completely different forces. You could say to them, if you bring this down here like this, that takes the air away from this end of our body. Already that's going to start to lift us up a little bit because of the nature of it. Then all I need to do is increase the lift this end by pushing my hands back. And if I look at my hands, because my body will follow my head, right? I'm going to increase the chest pressure. I'm going to come up into my sit. But what actually happens is when we're down on our backs, we've got this kind of position here. Just here, there's this massive amount of power when we're horizontal, like huge. So the first bit's going to come up pretty quick, and then as we've come up more and more, that power, in fact, is decreasing because the angle sets is less horizontal. So instead of a lot of power here, it's sort of less and less. And by the time we finally get to upright, the amount of power here is tiny. So as we're coming up, what we really need to do is, if nothing else, maintain this power, and if we can, we're in fact increasing this more all the time. What very often happens, instead of coming up like this, I see people do this instead, alright? Now people generally get that right. And they generally start off with this nice shape like that, because they feel that works quite well for them. They then get to about this kind of position, and instead of maintaining the power, they try and throw their weight over the middle of their body. This then, well, let's face it, power's there now, isn't it? This just makes them want to fall back down, which usually means they end up trying to chuck themselves over even more, which then puts them usually onto their belly. So the first time you take someone out and they've learned how to back fly, and you say, okay, well, we're going to try and get the exit right with the sit. They fall off their sit, they end up on their back. You're going to end up with people trying to do this, and you'll watch the whole skydive with them doing this. Like that. Hold way down. Just doesn't stop. And the more that someone does this, more angry they get with themselves. And the bigger it gets even more bigger and more violent. Just like our guy here, it almost feels like it's an upwards movement that sort of falls into place. And I liken this a little bit to if you were on a diving board and you were bouncing on the diving board. You've got two kind of dives you can do. You can do the one where you go bounce, 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 and you go straight up, go weightless, and then you come straight down and you miss the dive board by a few inches. So that's the kind of the weightless one where we're plunging down. The other dive you could do is where you bounce, 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 and then as you leave, you get an angle and you get projected. So we sort of almost want this sort of feeling of coming up, feeling weightless and falling into the position. There's a lot of things that is happening with this. So when you start off down here, you're on your back, probably only doing about 130. It's fairly low speed. Your sit position is going to be, let's say for argument's sake, 160. So as you come up into this sit, you're trying to sit at this 130 miles an hour. There's not really enough to play with. There's not much there to play with. So if we do find ourselves overcooking it, we haven't really got enough wind to sort of do that final correction. Whereas if we find ourselves coming up and falling into it, we haven't had to correct something that's been too big. And this is only going to feel nice once we start getting up to a slightly faster wind speed. So it's quite tricky to get someone out of the habit of throwing themselves over. And you're almost going to have to say to them when they land, after this whole 45 seconds of flopping from the belly to back to belly, all the way down, you've got to say to them, right, we need to drill how you go about this, because what you're doing is you're coming up and then you're throwing yourself over, and then you're on your belly and you're coming up, and it's all too big and it's too adventurous. Going from a belly to a sit, a belly flight position is down at 110, 120. Come up into your sit, there's very, very little air to work with. So if you come up and you overcook it at all, you haven't really got enough air to upright yourself. So this is where being very, very accurate with a belly up into a sit, doing a 90-degree up. But the last few degrees of that 90 are done so slow that really you're starting to get that weightless effect, is sort of where you want your guy. So you can land, you can show them the video, go, right, okay, this is all getting a bit adventurous here. What we need to do, throw away what you're doing, because nothing that you're doing now is really working, and let's drill this action, and do the whole thing, where you have them lying down on the ground, and you go, right, you're on your back, all you need to do is this, feet down, push your hands behind you, look at your hands. By the time you've counted to 2, you are going to be up into your sit position. And then we can start bringing our hands down. And this is a zero effort, zero energy maneuver. So those people who can fly this already, you guys, you probably remember when you first started doing the transition, a lot of effort, isn't there? It's like, I'm really putting a lot into this, and I'm going to like throw myself around. And now when you do it, you just change that shape of your body, you're up into the sit, like literally haven't even burned 1 calorie trying to do that. It's just you change the shape of your body, let the air do all the work. And that's the tricky bit, because this is so opposite to normal life. It's trying to get that across. So actually, you're better off and safer saying to the person, throw away how you think this should happen, and just do what I'm telling you to do, and nothing else, nothing more adventurous. Don't do anything else with your body. Just do those 2 actions, and that's it. And this will work for you. So there's a transition, and there's the challenges of the transition. It's not easy. And people are obviously going to be falling off their sit all the time. It's quite tricky. So the next one is getting into a stand. So if someone's in a good position, the whole turning bit Should be quite easy. They can do this, they can turn over the arms, the rudders. They could, if they wanted to, they could use a little bit of foot, and that's going to give them a good turn as well. So it doesn't really matter how they turn, and everyone's going to have their own personal preference. Getting into a stand is if you can get across to somebody that a sit-like position is a safe place, and a full-on stand is a safe place. And the bit in the middle, in the sky, it's not that it's unsafe, but it's very likely that if someone doesn't get into a full stand straight away, and they're a little bit kind of half attempt at it, and their legs are still bent, the air's probably going to overpower them on the legs and throw them onto their back. That's probably more likely what's going to happen. So, the thing to get across here is to say, okay, be nice and steady in a sit. If you're wobbling around and you chuck yourself into a stand, those wobbles aren't going to magically disappear. Just fix that first, get yourself nice and steady, take your time, and then basically at the click of a fingers you go from your sit position into a full-on stand. In an ideal world, if you wanted to fall straight to earth, you'd in fact have your hips very slightly forwards, just a little bit. So if I'm standing up here normally, you'll see that my toes are in front of my body. If I push my hips forwards, now I've got my body over the centre of my feet, and that's what's going to give me the perfect straight down kind of position. Now, it's actually good to say to somebody, get into a stand, just push your hips forwards a little bit, because chances are they'll get into a stand and they'll be a little bit like this anyway. They'll be kind of have their feet further forwards and have too much air on the back of their legs. So really and truly, by saying push your hips forwards a bit, you're probably just going to get them somewhere near straight, but it's going to be much more successful. You're going to accelerate from your 150 kind of mile an hour up to 200, maybe 210 if you carried on holding this. This is a very, very, very fast position. So chances are someone's very, very unlikely to be able to hold this for more than, say, 2 or 3 seconds at a time. And I would suggest to somebody, say, look, don't try and overcook this. We are demonstrating that we can hold a stand for no more than 3 seconds. Because the reason being, we are trying to gain we're trying to lose altitude, try and get down to our formation. That's what we're trying to do. That will be more successful if you did 3 lots of into a stand, 1,000, 2,000, through always getting a bit fast, back into a sit before I fall off it. Okay, where are they? There, yeah, need to do it again. 1, 2, 3, it's getting really fast. Okay, back off it. That's going to be far more successful than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm now doing 200 miles an hour, and I'm off. And the moment we've bailed onto our back, anything that we might have gained, we've sort of lost it. So we're better off doing a number of stabs at getting down, staying in control, staying, flying, than we are trying to sort of hold it and smoke it down. And whilst you're doing that, chances are that your formation is unlikely to be directly underneath you. So you're probably going to have to move towards it. So this is actually the easy bit. If you're in a good stand position with your hips forwards, then you're right on the power to lean your body back into the wind a bit more. And that's going to give you as fast a forwards movement as you want. You could just keep on leaning and you could keep on going faster and faster. And as long as we're staying, in balance with all this stuff, obviously if I had the wind pushing against, so this would be straight down, I'd be just continuing to get faster and faster. So you can move yourself forwards, you can also turn yourself. So as you're pushing back, you can use your upper body to give yourself a turn where you want to be. This takes a good bit of practice, that stand. It's not easy. And the speeds are so fast that it's very easy to start to get out of control very fast. The next thing with a sit. forwards movement and backwards movement. So if someone has come to you and they have now done the sequence of the FF1 jumps, so they're pretty good on their back. They can do turns, they can fast fall, and they now need to move forwards and backwards. I would suggest that all you really need to do with that is to be about 10 foot away from the person, have them close a 6 foot gap, and then have them drift away 6 foot. So this is about the proximity stuff. It's not about the big fast movements around the sky. Because really and truly what we're trying to do is have somebody who's safe at being in proximity with somebody else. That's the point of this tick. You're safe when you're around other people. So, just like we were talking about, if you wanted to move forwards, if you've got a good position, then it's a bit more push on the back. If we haven't got a good position, and you'll hear people say this to you, so how do I go forwards? What you do is you push your feet forwards more. And, there's a limit to how much that's going to work. This is if someone's got a bad position, you might hear that. Yeah, if you're going to go forwards, push your feet forwards. It will slowly drag you there, but it's not going to get you there at any speed. So if we've got a good position, then again it's almost infinite how much, if I keep on leaning back on the wind, I can just keep on going faster and faster. So your final, there's another thing the BPA also recommend, is if we do a whole jump of stand 360s. That's pretty nails, right? That's a nails manoeuvre. And you're supposed to do a stand 360 one way and a stand 360 the other way. During the FF1 jump, you are supposed to stable exit, turn in both directions in an ordinary sit, stand in both directions, and demonstrate forwards movement, backwards movement, by control, up and down by 10 foot. And then show some kind of front flip, back flip, something like that, something that takes you off your sit and you can flip back out and you sit again. Be realistic. What I tend to do, which I feel will give someone a really good tick in the box with this, is a stable exit, maintaining the sit, turns in both directions. I find that a full 360 is often a little bit too time consuming. And arguably someone might say, yeah, but if someone can't do it in that time frame, then they need more work. Oh, difficult one. So I always suggest a full 360 is not necessary. The demonstration of a turn in one direction and a demonstration turn back the other way, I would say that's probably enough. Then a demonstration of forwards movement, so someone can move forwards. Moving backwards, that one almost doesn't need to be demonstrated. That's an easy one, right? That's the default position. Most people are drifting backwards anyway. And they have to actively try to move forwards. Then demonstrate a stand, and then just literally in a stand come down to me. And then something that takes them on and off their sit, front flip or something like that, and a bit of a backtrack. And believe you me, you need to be a fairly competent flyer to squeeze all of that in. And that's probably about 2/3 of what the BPA are asking for. Now, it's a very tricky one, because when you land and you say, do you know what, you achieved all those things really well, you're nice and stable. The real question is this chap safe? Are they safe? Would I be happy for them to be jumping with a group of people? There was an instance a couple of years ago now, a coach, I'm not going to mention names and drop zones, who was signing people off as almost like trying to be popular or something like that. And these people really weren't ready at all. They're being signed off, they're doing a job for someone else, and these other people were going, oh my God, you know, I'm really sorry, I don't want you to be on the next jump because honestly you're not ready to sit fly with us. So what you really want to ask yourself is, it might be that maybe some of these manoeuvres weren't necessarily done particularly brilliantly, but if you can ask yourself that honest question, is this person, do I feel safe to fly with other people? Then I'd say they're probably very good to go. And that's the key. You want to almost have it so that they go off into the wilds of doing some bigger waves with some other people, and no one's going to come back to you and go, you signed that guy up. It's really unsafe. That's the key to this.